I'm going to start off today's discussion with a quick poll. Who here feels that CR initiatives need to be led from the top? Raise your hands. Right, most of us feel that way, and we're lucky enough to have two CEOs on our stage who believe that as well. First, I'm going to introduce Richard Noll. He's the chairman and CEO of HanesBrands. Hanes has a groundbreaking CR program that we're going to learn a little bit more about today. It has a very unique supply chain approach, which has had a very large environment impact. So here's just a taste of what Hanes has achieved under Rich's leadership. So from the chart, you can see there's been a lot of reductions by pound of apparel. So we have 24% less energy used, 31% reduction in carbon dioxide emissions, and a 31% reduction of water usage. Pretty impressive. Next, we have Richard Shadyac, President and CEO of ALSAC, the fundraising and awareness organization for St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Rick left his prior job as a lawyer in Washington, D.C. at a tough time for all organizations in 2009. Rick came to the nonprofit because, as he says, change is on all of us. And he certainly did institute change. Following his leadership, ALSAC employees contributed more than 10,000 hours of community service in 2015 alone. This and the work ALSAC has done to support St. Jude has improved Memphis and the surrounding communities on an economic level as well. It's estimated this impact will be $2.5 billion by 2021. So obviously, just a little bit of background on our two CEOs who are going to speak to us today. And what really stands out to me is that we have two very innovative leaders from different worlds, one an international for-profit corporation and another from a leading nonprofit. So I want to open up the stage to talk and start our discussion about CR and if it's viewed differently in for-profit and nonprofit organizations.
Go ahead, Rich. You can.
All right, I'll start. You know, I'm not sure there's that many differences. Let me talk about what I see as the similarities. At the end of the day, a nonprofit or a for-profit organization are both organizations that are organizations of people, and to get anything accomplished, you need to have a shared set of goals, and I think that's critical for both types of organizations. Setting those goals, I think publicly also makes a difference. And when I say publicly, I don't necessarily mean publishing them on a website for all to see, but broadly communicating them within the organization so everybody knows what you're trying to achieve. And then I believe what's measured gets managed, right? And having the right measurement systems so that people can see that you're actually making progress towards those goals and you can celebrate your successes. So I think those are a lot of the commonalities between for-profit and not-for-profit organizations. You know, each of our missions are going to vary a little bit, but I don't think that fundamentally impacts why we're trying to achieve that. You know, Rick, what do you think?
No, Rich, I agree with you. You know, it's a little different how a not-for-profit approaches corporate social responsibility because we're already mission-driven. I mean, that's what we're all about. So at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, we lead the way the world understands, treats, and defeats childhood cancer. And I'm very, very proud of that mission. It's one that, you know, we say to the world, no family's ever going to receive a bill from us. So that's our fundamental kind of, missional principle. However, I felt like we needed to do more. So in the not-for-profit space, I said, well, you know what, guys, let's impact the greater communities that we also have the privilege of serving. And in our city, Memphis, unfortunately, we have one of the lowest per capita incomes in the United States. Okay, and within a mile of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, there's a lot of things that we could impact. So I challenged our workforce and said, hey guys, I know we're already mission driven, but you know what? Let's get outside of our gates and let's make an impact in our greater community that we have the privilege of living in. And I challenged our employees that work for us remotely to do that. And they just immediately responded. So to me, what I've heard from our employees is that actually They love doing the good that's associated with St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, but it also really excited them that it was okay to continue to do that good in the greater society. So I think there really are a lot of similarities.
You know, if I'll just pick up on something you just said, because a lot of our community support is involved to, you know, we all live and work in our own communities, right? Regardless of how big the organization is or how broad its reach. And one of the things that excites our employees is actually supporting different initiatives from a community perspective. And when it comes to a lot of the things that we're talking about here, environmental and so on and so forth, you can identify those at your local community level. Yeah. You can identify with that at your national community level, and also you're just part of the world community. And we see that as a really great force to galvanize people to really want to go and attack and achieve these goals. And it makes them feel a lot more closer together, I think, with each other.
I actually think it improved our performance within our company, because I think people were already passionate about our mission, but when they felt like they were unleashed to do even greater good, these are people that want to do good already, and they became unleashed. And then, you know, we got it up. You saw Debbie said that we did 10,000 hours. Well, this past fiscal year, we did 22,000 hours of community service on top of what these guys already are doing for our mission. And it has a huge impact, over 400 organizations within our great city that were impacted.
Great. Now, Rich, you had mentioned that you need to communicate these shared set of goals and measure them. Could you offer some advice on how you approach that?
Well, actually, you started with what we had done from an environmental perspective. So we set goals in 2007. We did not actually communicate those goals to the public at large, but we communicated them thoroughly within our organization. Because at the end of the day, we have an organization, let me give you a little bit of background. So unlike many of the apparel companies that you might know, we actually own our own supply chain globally. So we have 70,000 employees around the world that all work for HanesBrands. And so for us to manage that supply chain and run it in the manner that we believe is the right way, both from a workforce and environmental perspective, it's a lot easier for us to do than those that are dealing with third parties who deal with third parties who deal with third parties. And so for us, though, the challenge is to galvanize all 70,000 people around the world to make sure that they have this shared goal and want to actually work towards it. So we have a couple of different methods of doing that. And I think around corporate social responsibility, let me share how we go about doing community support. So to create an awareness within our organization about how important it is to, I use an old-fashioned word for environmental responsibility, conservation. It used to be in vogue many decades ago, remember?
I remember.
Yeah. Now it's not, sustainability is, but I'm going to, little side point. Everybody can have their different thoughts on, what energy they prefer, this, that, or other thing. One thing I know is if you conserve and you use a lot less, you're just going to be a lot better off. And so we've tried to drive that through our organizations, and one of the ways that we did this is somebody came up with this concept, actually he's in the room, Chris Fox, called Green for Good, he and a number of other people. And it allowed people in the factories to actually recycle different products within the plant and sell those recycled goods. And then that raised money to create community support projects that people could volunteer for. So that helped get the ball rolling on creating a much more environmentally conscious group of people throughout the entire organization that was separate from the goals that we laid out as a corporate perspective. So we had to build excitement and get people rallying around these environmental things, and I think that was one way they could see the direct, tangible benefit of saying, hey, if we pick up the waste that normally gets thrown away and we sell it over here, that creates some money that we can go and we can paint our local orphanage or something like that. And that's one of the methods that we use to build excitement. Then we also laid out specific programs and projects, and then each facility had their own goals, and they rallied their organization around trying to achieve those goals. And just like we measure safety or anything. You post the metrics up on the board and everybody gets to see how you're doing. And then a part of that is to celebrate your successes. So people feel good about the progress that's being made, and that just makes people want to achieve more. And I think that's one of the major things that led us to hitting those goals and then setting new, even stronger targets over time. So those are some of the things that we've done.
I mean, more and more studies show that employees that feel tied to the results are more motivated. So if you communicate that, you're going to get more from your workforce.
Yeah. And, and it's important when you're dealing with different countries and different cultures around the world.
Sure.
There's more or less sensitivity to these issues depending upon where you're located, right? And so that was our way to help build sort of a common shared view throughout the entire Hanes organization that these things are important.
Right, and I mean, one of the more important topics we hear about today in terms of the workforce's talent, engaging talent, and CEOs, 75% report developing talent as a top priority according to PwC. So Rich, I'm going to stay on you about some of these programs that you're doing to keep employees engaged. I know you have some educational initiatives that you offer workers.
Yeah, so for us, education, actually we support our employees in a lot of different ways, but education's a critical one. And as I said, so we employ people, around the world, and generally we've got factories that are in places where the other alternatives to working in these factories is subsistence farming. And so we're actually some of the first factories that people will come off the subsistence farms and to get a job. And once they do that, they can actually then have a dependable income, because subsistence farming's good, until you actually have a drought or something happens and then the whole family's put at risk. And so for us, education of the workforce is critically important. And so some of our factories, you're taking people that have at best a third or fourth grade education, helping them learn the skills that they need to be successful. Now in other countries, they're more developed, such as Latin America. That's not as big of an issue, but actually a lot of employees haven't had the ability to go to high schools. And so we have initiatives that actually run high school education classes for those employees to help them get what would be the equivalent in the US of a GED, and we've graduated thousands of people from programs such as that. So it's one of our ways that we can actually educate our workforce, which helps us, it helps them, and it helps the local community.
That's awesome. That's
And
great.
how do you think it's impacted your culture?
There is nothing like helping somebody better themselves, for them to feel more respect in themselves. They get more respect from their family and their coworkers, and they also attribute and bring that respect to work, and I think it just knits, pun intended. Did you get the pun? Yes. All right. This side of the room got it. This side didn't so much. But, so it just knits our people together closer and closer, and I think that's what makes it such a great place to work. We've been blessed, and in Latin America, we actually received the Great Place to Work awards, and I think that's a vote from employees talking about how important it is that they feel good about HanesBrands.
And that's worth a round of applause, guys. That's a significant recognition.
Now, Rick, I understand a lot of your employees obviously have pride in their work, giving back. And you talked about the hours that they volunteer outside of the organization. And so why don't you speak to it a little bit more about why you think this is so important, and what is some of the feedback you get from these employees, and feedback also from the community, because you said it has made such a difference in the community at large.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So I approached it a little bit differently, and I challenged our employees to do something with respect to our mission that wasn't job related. That was the first thing. That's not included in the 22,000 hours. So, for instance, if they weren't capable of running a marathon, for instance, or a half marathon, and we run a major marathon through our campus, why don't you come out and cheer the people on that are going to be running through our campus? Why don't you go play bingo with some of our patients over at Target House and understand what they're going through, because many of our families come to us from all across the world, and they can get relationships with folks from different cultures and things like that. Volunteer at an event as opposed to making it part of your job. So that was the first thing. And then because we're so mission-driven, I decided that I wouldn't have an actual corporate social responsibility platform. I just said, you know what, guys, what turns you on? Is it, going to a rape counseling center? Is it going to a homeless shelter? Is it going and volunteering in a school? Is it mentoring a child? Is it putting together backpacks or clothing from one of his great brands that we could send over to a homeless shelter? And that's when they responded, because they have things that they're passionate about outside of their mission, outside of the mission of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And then what I heard back was just phenomenal. I had a great feeling that I would hear back great things from our employees, but they always said things like, Rick, I got so much more out of it than I put into it. I never realized how difficult people have circumstances that they're going through. We can really make a difference. And many of them simply said it changed them. It changed them. And it validated what I had been hearing from many of our corporate partners. Rich, we're blessed to have 75 major corporations in America that support St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And one of the great parts about my job is many of them invite me to speak to their employees. And their employees will come up and they will tell us how important giving back is as part of their job, and how much it means to their businesses, okay? Because they feel good about doing good associated with their work. So I've heard from CEOs about how it improves culture within the organizations, and we also hear from these CEOs, the very same CEOs and the employees, it also drives business. Because we know that doing good is good for business, and in fact, consumers are more likely to use your brands, to purchase your brands, if they feel good about what that brand is doing from a corporate social responsibility perspective. So when I heard back from our employees and they would say, I can't believe how great I feel about doing this, can I do more? I think it just opened up the floodgates. And what I challenged them to do this year, so we got 22,000 hours, almost everybody participated. I said, bring a friend. Doubled. Okay? Now all of a sudden you got 44,000 hours of community service, and then think about the impact. If all of you guys did the exact same thing, think about the impact. Think about the good that we can do in communities across the United States and the world, and the difference that we can make, and we don't need government involved, right? We do it. We do it.
No, it sounds like giving the employees a choice really empowers them, like you said, using their passions to do good. Now, from a corporate perspective, are there any challenges in organizing such initiatives, or is it you give them time? How is it kind of orchestrated?
I think time is the most precious resource. Everybody's got challenges. Time is a challenge within our organization. Our organization's about 75% women, and many of them have responsibilities with respect to kids. It's got to be voluntary. They have to want to do it. It's volunteering, right? That's what it's all about. So time is the single most precious resource. But what you also try to do is set up situations where they can involve their family. And then all of a sudden it becomes a family affair. So they bring their kids to come and interact with our patients, or they bring their kids over to that soup kitchen or that mission. And all of a sudden, assuming that the kids are of the right age, they understand the importance of giving back. I think philanthropy starts at home, and if mom and dad are great examples, I know I was blessed to have two parents that impressed upon me the importance of giving back. Those of us that are blessed really have an obligation to give back, and if they see mom and dad doing good, they're very likely to do good, themselves.
Right, that's a great point. It was brought up yesterday by MGM. They also do a lot of initiatives that include children, and like you said, when they see it, it'll become a lifelong part of their lives, these children, to give back and see how not everyone has what they have. So that's an excellent point. And you said that you feel like it did impact your culture.
Oh, absolutely.
And can you point to any examples?
Well, look, we've achieved record-breaking fundraising results, and so I mean that's the best example I can
Sure.
point to. I mean, we're growing at a pace that very few not-for-profits are growing right now. Look, it speaks to our mission, but it also speaks to the employees that I have. I am blessed to work with the most remarkable colleagues, and I thank God every single day for the people that I get to work with. But it's all in their performance. I mean, if they were unhappy with the direction that we're taking the organization, I don't think we'd be achieving the results that we're achieving. And you know, I also hear it from the community, and it's other communities, not just Memphis where we're based, but you know, we've got 31 satellite offices, field offices around the country because we're national and international brand, and I hear about the impact when I go into their communities and talk as well. So it's the easiest way for me to measure, Rich, is by results.
Absolutely. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the environment. Rich, as I shared earlier with the audience, some really impressive statistics. So you brought up the supply chain a little bit earlier, but I'd like to hear a little bit more about how you operate and engage those global employees and regulate your impact on the environment.
So since you have already given everybody the stats, let me talk a little bit more about the processes you're asking about. And I mean, it's really simple. It's like we do almost any initiative within the organization. We run our environmental issues or projects and initiatives the same way we would run trying to improve quality of the products,
Okay.
A little bit. So it's not like it's something that's off to the side. It's something that we actually do, as part of how we operate every single day. So first of all, the supply chain that we run is run mainly from Winston-Salem. So it's a global supply chain. And we have one global support group. We've got, one set of engineers that are based in the United States. So no matter where you go to any of our factories around the world, they're going to be built by the same team of engineers. So it's not like we have different standards depending upon what country you're in. Whether we're manufacturing in the United States, and we still do have a little bit of manufacturing in the United States, or we're in El Salvador or Honduras or Vietnam, we've got the same group of people creating the same infrastructure, whether it's wastewater treatment plants or whether it's infrastructure within the facilities. It's all done in the same manner and to the same level of standards. And so with that, we can ensure that we're using the right equipments with the right process and fine-tuning it. On the environmental side, you talked about water. So we can actually measure water usage
Sure.
in some of our textile facilities from Winston-Salem. So we can be assured that things are happening the way we want them to happen on a global basis. So it's part of how we just build out the infrastructure that allows us to make sure that we're getting the types of results that we want. So once you start with the right infrastructure, right, that's going to be, and you're using the right machinery and the right processes that are going to improve the results, you then have to have people locally that also are attuned to making sure they're getting every potential use out of, each, what's the measure of energy? Joule of energy that goes into the process. And that's what I talked about earlier, which is in creating that employee engagement, having a desire to want to actually hit a goal, tying incentive compensation to achieving some of those goals, and rallying people around to make sure that as you're micromanaging what's happening in a plant in any given day, that
Right.
you're actually keeping an eye towards those long-term goals.
Right.
So I think it's really done on two levels: the infrastructure that you build out that we can control, and then creating the right workforce incentives to make sure that people are helping us achieve those goals.
Right, and what's the cost impact keeping it consistent?
Well, as I said, since it's part of how we just operate the entire supply chain, I don't really see there's no additional costs of running these projects or initiatives, right? So whether we've got systems in place to manage quality, we've got systems in place to manage, the workforce hours, we've got systems in place to manage energy usage per pound and so on and so forth. So it's all just part of running the overall supply chain. At the end of the day, when you use less, you actually do save money. And if you think about our brands, what our brands are geared towards around the world is selling product at a really great value to a broad audience of people. So we sell, our Hanes in the United States is in 9 out of 10 households.
That's amazing.
So we're out there selling to everyone.
Who's wearing Hanes right now, I'm sure. Some of us are, you don't have to admit it.
All right. And so what we want to do is to create that value, we need to have continuous improvement, improve our productivity each and every year to keep costs low. I'll tell another side story. About 6 or 7 years ago, cotton had increased and we actually needed to put forth a price increase, and hadn't been done in a long time. So when we were going around to our retailers, I brought with them an ad from Life magazine. Does anybody here know what Life magazine
I do.
was? So it was an ad from Life magazine in the early 60s. And it was advertising, that's when manufacturers advertised the price of their products, because the retailers didn't set them, the manufacturers did. And so it was a Christmas ad, and it advertised a 6-pack of Hanes men's briefs for about $1 a pair. Well, in 2010, you could buy, and this is right before we put in that price increase, you could buy a 6-pack of Hanes men's briefs for about $1 a pair.
Wow.
It was 40 some odd years,
Right.
and it was the same retail price.
Wow.
So I was telling our retailers, we said, hey, every 45 years, we think we should get a price increase. So, but to be able to achieve something like that, you need to really rapidly improve productivity over time and really manage your costs.
Right.
And one way to do that is to use less of everything, use less materials, use less energy, use less water. And so I think it's just part of our overall philosophy of if we can figure out how to use less, you guys are going to get a screaming value from our great brand that you can feel good about. And that's just part of our corporate DNA.
But, I mean, we must acknowledge that this is unique to apparel. It's not always done like this. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you.
So, okay, well, let's switch gears a little bit. And Rick, let's talk about some of the fundraising that you have to do. Because unlike any other hospital, the majority of funding for St. Jude comes from individual contributions. Thanks to donor, no family pays for anything. So what does that really mean, and how do you manage it as president and CEO of ALSAC?
So it's our responsibility to basically fund St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. The hospital budget this year is going to approach $1 billion, and between 75% and 80% of that money has to come from the general public. And that doesn't count capital, folks. That's on top of that, I have to raise the money for the capital. So we have a foundational promise that our founder made back in 1962. It's something that I am incredibly proud of. No family will ever receive a bill from St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, not for the costs of treatment, travel, housing, or food, because all we want mom and dad to worry about is helping their child survive cancer. So that means that if a child needs to come from New York or from North Carolina, we fly that mom and that child, that family, to Memphis, Tennessee. We're going to pick them up at the airport. Obviously, we'll triage them immediately, and if they need to go into the hospital, they're admitted into the hospital. If they're well enough, in quotation marks, so that they can go into one of our housing facilities, we put them into one of our housing facilities. And then we take care of all of their medical expenses, and we even give them food. So we have a wonderful cafeteria, but when they're in our housing facilities, we want to give them money so that they can go to the local Kroger or whatever the grocery store is, so that they can actually have meals and cook those meals and kind of be a normal family. We even have a school at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, because our kids come from all across the United States and the world, and we want our kids to continue with their education. So we have full-time teachers that work with local community teachers to make sure these kids stay together. And that's what our model is. And it was, the model, actually, when you think about the promise that was made in 1962 that no family would ever pay, is remarkable when you think about it in current context. Because what Danny Thomas and the early founders really meant was that no family should have to make a healthcare decision based upon how much money they have in their bank account, in their wallet, or their purse. At St. Jude, we're going to do whatever it takes to get a child better. So that means that if we need to order that second MRI and we know the insurance company isn't going to cover it, we're going to order the second MRI. If we need to use an experimental drug that we know the insurance company is not going to cover, we're going to order and use that experimental drug, assuming we get consent from the family. And our results are phenomenal. As a result of this approach to medicine, we've taken the overall survival rates from 20% to over 80% in 54 short years. We're shooting to get it to 90%, and we'll never stop until no child dies from cancer. We've taken the most common form of childhood cancer, acute lymphoblastic leukemia, from a 4% survival rate in 1962 to 94% today.
Wow.
So I mean, it's phenomenal progress.
Phenomenal.
Well, this is what I say, though, Debbie. I appreciate that applause, but the applause go to you, because you all are the ones that have supported this proposition that no family should, and no doctor, quite frankly, should have to make a healthcare decision or, provide a service based upon whether or not it's going to be reimbursed. Okay, and we were the institution that proved that race isn't a factor in the survivability of pediatric cancer if the child's treated at St. Jude. So why is that? It all comes down to resources, folks. It comes down to resources. We're going to do what it takes to get a child better. And President Clinton, and this is not a political statement, came and visited us well after he was out of office, and he was fascinated by that study that race was not a factor in the survivability of pediatric cancer if the child's treated at St. Jude. And there are clearly different healthcare outcomes based upon race and ethnicity. But at St. Jude, the reason why that doesn't exist is we treat every child exactly the same, regardless of what their economic circumstance or their background is. Every child gets the same chance at surviving cancer. They're going to be put up in the same facilities. We're going to get the exact same treatment. It's a beautiful model that he said this is exactly how medicine should be practiced everywhere. So that's what we try to do at St. Jude, and it's you guys that do it. You guys allow us to do it, the general public that supports us in incredibly generous ways.
Right, and does that make you feel like there's a lot of pressure, to get those fundraising dollars in? I mean, I can only imagine.
Well, yeah, this year I've got some of my colleagues here. We have to raise over $1 billion, $1,170 million, and we start from zero every single year. But we're blessed to have the support of corporate America, but guys, it's really middle America's charity. So 68% of our revenue comes from household incomes of $75,000 or less. It's something that I'm incredibly proud of. We're blessed to have 9 million donors across the United States that believe in this incredible mission. Many corporate partners, and the corporate partners come to us and tell us how much our partnerships do for their brands. They talk about the morale that it increases. They bring their employees. So many corporations have incentive trips for sales and things like that. Our partners let their employees come for their incentive trip to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital to serve our kids. And instead of going to the Bahamas or something like that, they say it's one of the most remarkable experiences of their life. It's so humbling to come and to serve that mission personally.
And to be so inspired by the
I
work
could talk
that's
forever,
done
so I
there.
better shut up. So.
So we started our conversation talking about CR and how it should be led from the top. So I think our audience would love to get some feedback from you guys about how they can get senior level buy-in for some of the things they want accomplished at their organizations.
Go for it, my friend.
So, at the end of the day, if it's not led by the top, it's really not going to happen.
Agreed.
And it needs to be the senior people in the organization that are committed to it. And I think one of the reasons, I'll pick up on something the two of you were talking about earlier, which was, getting kids involved in understanding community support. And in our corporation, that takes a little bit of a different form, but it's getting people that are younger in the organization very early in their career tied to corporate social responsibility. And because it's what happened to me. When I was in my 30s, and I came to work in our organization, there were senior people that were dedicated to making the Hanes organization highly ethical, because they were highly ethical people. They believed in supporting the community, and so they supported it, and they supported younger executives to do that as well. And so I developed those those habits at a very early age. And I think I'm just a reflection of the people that went before me that had that same kind of philosophy. I picked it up, and I hope to leave that to, to people as I move on. So it needs to start at the top. It needs to be a shared belief amongst the entire top of the organization. And then, like any initiative, you need to then have people in charge of actually implementing it. But if it doesn't come from the top and we don't talk it and we don't, walk the walk, it's really not going to cascade through the organization. And so it doesn't mean that you just have to superficially say it. It means you actually need to visibly show that commitment through different initiatives, through different, talking about it from at different employee gatherings. Actually, whenever we have a senior management meeting, there's always a piece that that the senior management team will carve out to talk about different initiatives that we've got going on. And so I think that's part of making sure that people say, oh, it's not just, that they're signing the memo or something like that that goes out that mandates this. They're actually truly engaged and getting periodic updates, and being part of those celebrations of successes is also critical.
Right.
So those are some of the things.
Right, and it shows that it's authentic, and it makes employees feel that way.
Yeah.
If it's not authentic, people aren't going to follow you. If they don't believe that you're in it for the right reason, I tell my leadership team all the time, if you're only doing it because I happen to be watching, you're in it for the wrong reason. And quite frankly, people are going to see through that. You have to serve with authenticity. If you're really a phony, people will pick that up, and you know what? They're not going to follow you. And it means doing exactly what Rich says. It means rolling up your sleeve and doing whatever it is. Whether if you're going into your community and you're picking up trash, pick up the trash. Okay, don't drive the car, pick up the trash. And I mean that. Don't drive the truck, pick up the trash. Do whatever it takes, but do it because you want to do it. And then other folks get that sense, and you want to do it because it makes you feel good. At the same time, you're doing good.
Right, and I've heard that it's very contagious, that good feeling. So we've talked about a lot of great points today, so I just want to end our discussion on about legacy, and if you two, have an idea of what you want your legacy to be at your organizations.
Well, legacy questions always mean that we're old. That's okay. It's okay. I don't mind. I'm blessed to work for an amazing mission. My father and my mother were one of the ones in the 1950s that Danny Thomas approached about creating St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. My father served as the CEO of this great mission for about 13 years and literally committed 50 years of his life in board service and things like that. I certainly want to continue the legacy. In the United States, we've made great progress with cancer, but cancer remains the leading cause of death by disease in U.S. kids today. I want my legacy to be that we've inched closer to the day that no child will die in the dawn of life, but I also want to expand it, because while we've made great strides, around the world over 180,000 kids are going to be diagnosed with cancer. Many more will go undiagnosed because they don't have access to modern medicine. Survival rates in many third world and developing countries are well below 50%. In some instances, they're in the 10 and 20%. And we've made a commitment at St. Jude to expand well beyond our borders. And we're in 17 countries with 24 partner sites in those countries. And having traveled to some of the places that you've described, like El Salvador and Honduras, where we have actual clinics, I want my legacy to be that kids from all backgrounds have access to quality care, and that they have the opportunity to survive pediatric cancer and to grow up and realize all the dreams that we all have, that we're blessed to have here. And hopefully, if nothing else, that I've created the awareness in the United States and around the world that this is a huge problem that we can all make a difference in, and that resources should not be the factor in determining whether or not a child gets care. That's what I'd like my legacy to be.
Absolutely.
So for me, I've always said that I want my success to be measured not at how well we do at HanesBrands while I'm there, but in the many years after I leave.
Beautiful.
And that's true from a business perspective. It's also true from a corporate responsibility perspective. And I talked about the people that were the role models for me. And I want my legacy to continue to create that legacy throughout generations of management at HanesBrands, both in terms of driving business initiatives as well as driving a belief in corporate social responsibility. And I think we do that every day.
Beautiful.
Well, we'll end on that note. Please join me in thanking our panelists.
Thanks, man.